Hey, it's Mr. Morris here, and welcome to a revision video for AQA's Paper 1, Question 2. Question 2 is worth 8 marks, and it's always the same. It asks, how does the writer use language to? It's usually describe, because remember, Paper 1 is about fiction, which means that you're going to be given a story, and stories aren't just action. Stories aren't just narrative. There's plenty of description in there, and you're going to be asked how the writer has used words, phrases, and language in general to create an accurate, vibrant description of a certain thing. What that boils down to is language analysis. You might hear that term a lot, analysis, and you might be wondering exactly what it means. So let me tell you. Analysis is an attempt to explain something by looking for patterns or anomalies, things that stand out. For example, let's imagine for a second that I'm not an English teacher, I'm an ice hockey coach. It's the end of the season, and I want to know which player is the best player. So what I do is I get all my results for the entire season. Everything in front of me. That's my data. My question is, who's the best player? Now what I look at is, I look for patterns. Who is on the ice usually when we score goals? Who has played the most minutes? Who is usually playing when we're winning? Who's usually playing when we're losing? Patterns. Anomalies are things that stand right out. If there's one player who's played more minutes than every other player, that's an anomaly. If there's one player who scored more goals than every other player, that's an anomaly. By looking at patterns and anomalies, seeing what I've got, I might be able to work out who's my best player. Instead of ice hockey players, our data is language. And in this case, because it's paper 1, it's a story. We have to look at the words the writer chose and the order the writer chose to write them in. Thankfully, our data is not going to be a whole season's worth of ice hockey statistics. It's going to be something small, 4 or 5 lines. And the best way to start is to take an overall snapshot, a picture, feeling, what the tone is, a taste, the mood. When people don't know what I mean by tone, I like to do something called the thumbs up test. You've got positive, negative, neutral. One of those words is usually a good place to start. Is the thing that's described positive? Is it negative? Is it neutral? Once you've worked that out, it might be worth your while going back to what you've been given. You're given the title, the year it was published, and a brief bit of context, what the story's about and whereabouts in the story it's from. Now you can use this context to help you in your analysis, but what you can't do, never do, analyse the context. You can't take quotes from it, and you shouldn't really be discussing it. So we're going to do an example today. Here's your context. This text is taken from Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck. It was published in 1939. It's a novel about poor farmers who are forced to leave their land and move far away. The question today is going to be, how does Steinbeck use language to describe the tractors? I guess I'll read it out. The tractors came over the roads and into the fields, great crawlers moving like insects, having the incredible strength of insects. They crawled over the ground, laying the track and rolling on it and picking it up. Diesel tractors, puttering while they stood idle, they thundered when they moved and then settled down to a droning roar. Snub-nosed monsters raising the dust and sticking their snouts into it, straight down the country, across the country, through fences, through dooryards, in and out of gullies in straight lines. They did not run on the ground, but on their own roadbeds. They ignored hills and gulches, watercourses, fences, houses. So what's our overall impression? Thumbs up, thumbs down, middle? It's pretty clear that this is a thumbs down description of tractors. We're not supposed to like the tractors, and in fact, they're almost like enemies. Antagonists, if you will. Can we be more specific than negative? Or inspiring? Intimidating? Now let's look at our context. This is a book about farmers who are forced to leave their land. Is it the tractors forcing them to leave? That certainly fits with the description. Maybe we can talk about that later. First thing we're going to look for is patterns. Now, methods or techniques that are patterns without you realising it are things like semantic fields, repetition, sentence structure. Pause the video now and see if you can see any of those things. Find any? Good, I'm sure you did. You definitely did. If not, I've highlighted some for you now. Next thing you're looking for are anomalies. Anomalies are things that stick out. Usually these things have proper English names that we talk about quite a lot, especially in things like poetry. You're looking for things like similes, metaphors. Now, individual words can be anomalies, words that stick out for some reason, words you don't see very often or that don't fit with the rest of the piece. One thing I wouldn't ever look for is alliteration. When you're writing, I think using alliteration is great. It's a really nice thing to do. But when you're analysing, it's very difficult to explain why the writer chose to use it. So my advice is avoid. Pause the video now and see if you can see any of those things. Find any? It's worth bearing in mind that this extract will have been chosen with this question in mind, so there's almost certainly going to be at least some of these things in there. If you can't find them, step 1, look again. It's easy to miss things when you're stressed. Step 2, you're going to have to try to focus on words rather than the more bread and butter things like simile and metaphor. Once we've found our evidence, we can start our analysis. We need to take our impression, negative, and explain how and why the writer created that impression. Easy, right? Right? So what does one of these look like? Other subjects might teach you writing frames like P or peel. P. Point, evidence, explain, link. What exactly is a point? Explain what? Link to what? I'm going to let you into my English specific strategy. Now, let's be clear. I'm not telling you to argue with your English teacher. I'm not saying that this method is the only way to succeed in this question. This is just something that works for me and for my students, and I think it's quite simple. And I made it with the mark scheme in mind, so it's designed to get you the most marks in the most efficient way. It goes like this. Effect, choice, intention. Effect is what the reader thinks or feels. Choice is what the writer chose to do. Intention is what the writer was trying to achieve. This writing frame can be used for any paper 1 question 2. It's self-differentiating, which means that you are in charge of the quality of your answer. The frame is just there to guide. You can make this as in-depth or as casual or as short as you like. I'll give you 2 examples, one quite basic and one more advanced, extrapolated. The reader gets the impression that the tractors are negative. For example, Steinbeck chose to describe them with the simile moving like insects. Perhaps he wanted to make the tractors seem like disgusting pests that should not be on the farms. It works, right? The second one, the reader gets a sense of the relentless power of the tractors from the structure of the description. Steinbeck chose to use extended complex sentences with numerous subordinate clauses, along with lists of both prepositions, such as down, across, through and in, and nouns, such as hills, gulches, fences and houses. Perhaps Steinbeck was trying to show the untiring and all-encompassing dominance of the tractors over the evicted farmers. Their relentless mechanical power covers everything in sight, and by forcing us to read the description at a fast pace with minimal pauses, Steinbeck replicates the breathless sadness and wonder that the farmers would have felt at seeing the tractors occupy their land. Remember, you've only got 8 to 10 minutes to answer this question. If you heard that second answer and thought, sheesh, I could never do that, then that's all right. As long as you stick to the structure, you will write a good answer, I promise. The most common question I get asked by students is, Sir, how many paragraphs do I have to write? I wish it was that simple. There is no magic number. It's more about quality than quantity. But, I mean, basically, the more the merrier. If you can stick to the time limit, the more you can write as long as it's good, the better. There is no point repeating yourself, though, so if you're just regurgitating the same thing, move on. One thing to think about, though, is that the mark scheme rewards a range of quotes. However many a range is, I usually say it's at least 3 different quotes. If you can get 4, then that's better. I've got 3 top tips for this question. 1, vary your methods. Don't just pick out 3 similes. Go for a range, different ones. Try a simile, a metaphor, and some juxtaposition. Or try some personification. Make sure you're showing that you know exactly what you're talking about and you've not just learnt one thing. 2, split your writing into paragraphs and vary your sentence starters. Examiners hate reading one long, unpunctuated, unparagraphed page of analysis. Make it seem like you are genuinely engaging with the question and the text, rather than just going through the motions and doing this to get a GCSE. 3, vary your effects. Rather than just makes the reader think this is negative, try to come up with some more subtle effects, thoughts or feelings. If you can, link these effects together, allow them to build on one another. Building on your previous comment is a higher level strategy if you're aiming for the 7 or 8 out of 8. The structure ECI, that can be used with variations for paper 1 question 2, paper 1 question 3, paper 1 question 4, paper 2 question 3 and paper 2 question 4. I hope this has made paper 1 question 2 a little bit clearer. A lot of people think that this is one of the easier questions on the GCSE, and I have to agree. If you read the question and read the text clearly, follow the structure and spend the right amount of time, then it's a really easy way to bank some marks. I hope this has helped. If you've got any feedback or questions, pop them in the comments below. And check out my other videos if you are sitting an English language GCSE. Thanks for watching.